Let's talk about the Intel Arc architecture,
Heyo.
DGPUs. Um, but I guess I'll give it a short preface and let you sort of talk about some of the details, Eric. But
Sure.
um, Intel, everybody knows them. They are CPU makers, manufacturers, um, and a handful of other things. But their bread and
Yeah.
butter are CPUs. Um, they have been dabbling for the past couple of years for graphic solutions that were on the SoC itself, to make lightweight notebooks a more viable platform for gaming and other light graphical tasks. Um, and I think last year, the year before, they actually pushed forward with a more serious chip called the DG1, which was still an SoC based GPU, but it was competing with the lowest end like Nvidia microcards that you can get for your PC or laptop. Um, and this was giving an indication, as was Intel, that they were taking more seriously their push into graphics processing, and I think for good reason, because uh, I think it would be hard for anybody to notice in the CPU space that full size computers, and full size laptops are moving more to specialist purpose, whereas mobile platforms and mobile processors are being aimed at the more generalist type. So Intel's still caught right in this little space where they have desktop CPUs, uh, and a lot of their core buyers are people who are buying work either workstations or for gaming and graphics purposes. So they kind of doubled down and uh, are pushing hard into the GPU space with their own discrete solution. And this was announced this week, I believe. I think it was this week, um, to further illustrate what their intentions were. Real quickly, uh, the graphics, I guess, architecture is called Arc. All of their GPU that they're going to be releasing, the first being the Alchemist,
Yep.
and future chips having other nerdy names of like
Battle
magic,
Mage.
well, yeah, like battle and stuff like that.
It's ABCD. It's Alchemist, Battle Mage. I'm blanking on what C is, and then D is Druid.
Yeah, they're clearly pegging their audience for what they are and going, yeah, this works for them. They are focusing on their new technology, uh, by also going to TSMC,
TSMC.
6 nanometer fabrication method, which is far smaller than what they currently have on all their current Intel chips. Likewise, they also showed off their main CPUs that are moving down to their internal 10 nanometer process. Um,
Right.
first card is launching in Q1 2022. That will be the Alchemist. But either way, they went there with Alchemist. They have I think it's 512 cores,
Yep.
up from 90 something on their DG1. So they're making pretty large advances, and presumably their future chips that will be released over the years will see likewise uh, significant bumps in their amount of computational cores.
The thing that caught my eye, there were two major things. One was, and you've mentioned it, the fact that they're using TSMC's 6 nanometer fabrication process, um, rather than their own. Right? Like, it's like that basically an admission that they're behind the times a little bit, and they have some catch up to do. You mentioned that they also released some CPUs. Earlier this month, they announced the Alder Lake set of CPUs, which are running in their 10 nanometer process. And they announced that they are going to be shifting their CPU production to 7 nanometer in 2022. Meanwhile, they're also going to be shipping CPUs at 6 nanometer, which were fabricated at another location. So that's, to me, was an interesting kind of admission that, like, look, if we want to compete, we have to use other people's tech. Um, but it's good to see that they are doing that, and they're not just kind of sticking to their guns and saying we refuse to use other people for production if it would better suit the product. The other thing that's really interesting to me is the part of what they announced wasn't just this line of CPUs, or excuse me, GPUs, but it was the technology behind it. Right. So the technology that they announced is kind of the developer focused technology, but end user targeted, and that means it's Intel's own response to DLSS, NVIDIA's proprietary kind of super upscaling technology, where they take rendered frames that were rendered at much lower resolution, like 720p, 1080p, and then upscale them to 4K so that you can get fine detail out of less initial computation energy. The thing that makes Intel special here is that their technology is open. Apparently, it is a kind of a specification, I think, that any manufacturer can work towards or provide drivers for that will allow this to be cross-platform, cross-hardware. They're shipping it with their graphics cards, but the implementation that they have, they've also added support for it to AMD and Nvidia-based GPUs of a certain architectural generation and newer. So they have their own kind of version of the super upscaling, and their goal is to make it cross-platform, which benefits basically everybody. Rather than having to work directly with a GPU manufacturer, a game developer could target tools that are cross-platform and make sure that everybody gets the benefits of this super scaling stuff.
But I still think like the interesting part of this is that Intel is acknowledging that a bigger problem is having proprietary AI systems to an NVIDIA, based tensor system that will be, employing this. And to be very clear, the sort of cores that that NVIDIA uses and Intel is setting the precedence for uh, is currently like, it's not exclusive to, but in Nvidia's case, their cores function in a very specific way. So if they're employing some AI based system, as of right now, you can only get it on an Nvidia system, and it can be applied then more than just upscaling. There's a lot of other uses for AI, it's just not really being employed so much. So Intel taking the lead in saying, look, we're going to provide hardware to be able to do this, but the system that we're going to be using is up for anybody to grab, and anybody who wants to include this type of hardware on a graphics chip or even their CPU hardware, I would imagine. So this is something open to Apple chips that have dedicated AI hardware, as does Google, pushing in that direction, and so on. So I think they're really looking forward towards advancing the type of use of AI and making it open platform, and then them just being on the leaders of it, so their hardware would be preferred over others. That process is called XESS, or I think it's called XS. But
yeah, that would be my guess based on their.
I haven't heard anybody call it that yet, so I think it's just me probably reading the marketing team's minds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, there was a good question brought up by Gomi, which was, what's the purpose of this, of them supporting machine learning? Is it their intent more on apps or gaming? And I had an answer for it, but do you have a?
Do you mean just in general? I mean, I guess that's what the way I'll take the question is here.
Well, I think it's like, what do you think Intel's strategy here? Like, clearly they're approaching gamers. I think they're clearly approaching gamers with their naming conventions and providing probably a GPU that could work really well in small gaming applications, not super large rigs, but it may be going in line with what like Steam machines we're looking at, which are like compact, all-in-one gaming boxes,
little boxes. Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think their kind of strategy here is by pursuing discrete graphics GPUs and
Yeah, I think that the Gomi is absolutely correct here in bringing up the question. I don't think if GPUs were had their kind of utility locked in the games industry, I don't think they'd care. I think they would leave it to AMD and Nvidia to battle out. Um, the problem is the machine learning, AI technology, and in particular, the data, um, the mining features, and just how valuable GPUs can be with the massively parallelized computation in GPU stuff, general purpose graphics programming. Some analysts inside of Intel have been watching what's been going on in the chip sectors, have been seeing Nvidia just like rake in cash, selling tons of GPUs. The fact that over the last year, it's been almost impossible to get a hold of GPUs, not because the gamers are buying them all up, but because of like server farms at Azure and AWS and GCP, Google Cloud Platform. All of these major uh, uh, like cloud providers are buying up fleets of pallets of GPUs. They can stick them into servers and server racks to provide, other technology industries with more processing power. Right now, Intel can't play ball in that sphere. So not only are they missing out on that space, they're also struggling in the CPU department, taking hits from Apple with the M1, trouncing them at least in marketing and in reviews from consumer devices and consumer reviewers. And then also AMD doing a great job with their most recent Threadripper series of CPUs. So like, yeah, it makes sense that they're trying to do this. And my guess here is that if they're starting to enter the market, they take one of two approaches. One would be let's work with the let's work with gamers and try to feed them and get them interested and excited about the technology, and use that as a marketing engine as they build up their experience in the marketplace. And second, the other opportunity they would have is to say, hey, we focused our GPUs on giving you the best computation per watt. That's the kind of the two marketplaces, and it's a lot harder to sell en masse and build up a reputation as being powerful and good, especially when you don't necessarily have all of the architecture that these incumbents do and you're building towards it. That's my guess as to why they're starting in the games industry, and their eventual goal is to say, no, we're a sheep or a wolf in sheep's clothing here, right? We're stepping into the games industry, but our real goal is what's behind the games industry.